Rain fell softly that afternoon, whispering against the old church windows like tears from heaven itself. Inside, a bride sat alone in her wheelchair, her white gown pooling around her motionless legs like a field of crushed petals. Her trembling hands held a bouquet of lilies, her favorite flowers, the ones he said matched her soul. But now, he was gone. Her groom, her promise of forever, had just walked out minutes before the ceremony. The guests had already left. The band had stopped playing. Only silence remained, heavy and suffocating. In that silence, she could still hear his words echoing, cold, cruel, unforgettable. "I can't do this, Layla. I can't marry someone who'll never walk beside me." That was the moment her heart broke, not because he left, but because she finally saw herself through his eyes, broken, less unwanted. If you believe that kindness still exists, that second chances can rewrite even the saddest stories, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. Because what happened next will remind you that love doesn't see limits, it heals them. Layla had been paralyzed from the waist down for 3 years after a car accident. Before that, she was vibrant, an artist who loved to dance, paint, and hike in the mountains. But life changed in a single heartbeat when her car skidded on a rainy road. The doctor said she was lucky to be alive. She didn't feel lucky. The world grew smaller, stairs became walls, stairs became knives, and pity became the air she breathed. Still, she tried to live with dignity. She painted from her chair, taught art to kids online, and smiled through pain most couldn't imagine. When she met Ryan, tall, handsome, a man with dreams, she thought maybe, just maybe, she could have a normal life again. He said he loved her, said her strength inspired him. But when it came time to prove it, his love was as fragile as paper. He left her at the altar, embarrassed to marry a woman in a wheelchair. That night, Layla sat in her small apartment, makeup smeared with tears, staring at the shattered reflection of herself in a broken mirror. The white dress that once symbolized love now looked like a cruel joke. She deleted her social media, turned off her phone, and disappeared from the world. Days turned into weeks. Her paintings dried on unfinished canvases. The walls of her room felt like a cage. She only went outside to buy groceries or roll through the nearby park late at night when no one would see her. That's where it happened, where fate crossed paths with her shattered soul. It was a quiet evening, the kind that smelled like rain and loneliness. Layla sat by the fountain, watching the ripples. Then, from behind the trees, a little boy came running, no older than 7. He tripped and fell, scraping his knee. She quickly rolled toward him, offering her scarf to stop the bleeding. The boy looked up at her, tears in his big brown eyes, and said softly, "Thank you, lady." Moments later, a man came rushing in, a strong-looking guy in his mid-30s, wearing a worn-out denim jacket and worry in his eyes. "Ben! Are you okay?" he asked, kneeling beside his son. Then he looked up at Layla, his expression softening as he realized she had helped him. "Thank you," he said sincerely. Layla smiled faintly. "He's brave. Just needs a little magic kiss on the knee." The man chuckled. "He's tougher than me sometimes." That's how Layla met Daniel, a single dad, a former firefighter who left the service after losing his wife to cancer. He worked nights as a mechanic and spent every free moment raising his boy. Life had been unkind to him, too. Maybe that's why he didn't look at Layla with pity. He looked at her like she was still whole. Over the next few weeks, they kept meeting by accident, or maybe not by accident. Daniel's son, Ben, would always run to her first, showing her his drawings and stories. Daniel would sit beside her, sharing quiet conversations about life, about loss, about learning to breathe again after pain. For the first time since the accident, Layla laughed. Really laughed. Daniel had that way about him, grounded, gentle, real. One day Ben asked, "Miss Layla, can you come see me at my school art fair? I made a rocket just like the one you painted." She hesitated, but Daniel encouraged her. "He talks about you all the time. You'd make his day." So she went. That afternoon, in the buzzing school gym, surrounded by kids' laughter, Layla felt alive again. Parents smiled, teachers waved, and Ben proudly introduced her as my friend who paints better than anyone. But not everyone was kind. A group of mothers whispered nearby, comments dripping with mockery. That's the woman who got left at her own wedding, one sneered. I saw it on Facebook. Another snickered. Guess the wheelchair was too much for the groom. Layla froze. She tried to hide her trembling hands, but Daniel saw everything. He stepped closer, his jaw tight, and said quietly but firmly, You ladies should be ashamed. My son looks up to her more than anyone I know. Maybe you should teach your kids what real courage looks like. The women fell silent, embarrassed. Layla couldn't speak, her throat burned from holding back tears. Daniel knelt beside her and whispered, You don't have to walk to stand tall, Layla. Something in her heart shifted that day. For the first time, she believed she wasn't broken, she was surviving. From then on, Daniel and Ben became part of her routine. They'd visit her apartment for art lessons, share dinner, and talk late into the night. Daniel would fix things around her house, door hinges, lights, her old wheelchair. But what he truly repaired was her spirit. Then one evening, during a community fundraiser, the mayor announced a charity ball to raise money for disabled artists. Layla was asked to paint the event's main artwork. Nervous but determined, she spent weeks creating a massive painting, a vivid portrait of hope, showing a woman in a wheelchair painting wings on her own back. When the night came, she rolled into the ballroom wearing a simple blue gown. The crowd turned to look, but instead of feeling judged, she felt proud. Daniel and Ben stood near the stage, cheering her on. The painting was unveiled under the spotlight, and a hush fell over the room. Then applause erupted, thunderous, emotional. Among the guests was her ex-fiancé, Ryan. He approached her afterward, guilt in his eyes. Layla, I didn't realize how strong you were. I made a mistake. Layla looked at him calmly and said, You didn't make a mistake, Ryan. You just couldn't see beyond your fear. I did. As she turned away, Daniel met her gaze from across the room. He smiled soft, proud, steady. That's when Ben ran up, holding a small box. Miss Layla, Daddy said I can give you this. Inside was a paintbrush, its handle carved with the words Keep Creating. Her eyes filled with tears. Daniel walked over and said, You've painted so many things, Layla. But you've also painted hope into our lives. You showed me that strength doesn't always roar, it sometimes rolls on wheels. In that moment, surrounded by applause and light, Layla realized something. Love wasn't about being perfect or whole. It was about finding someone who saw beauty in your scars and still chose to stay. A few months later, during a quiet evening at the same park where they first met, Daniel set up an easel. Ben held a camera. The sky was painted in gold and violet. Daniel knelt in front of Layla, not in pity, but in reverence, and said softly, You taught me how to live, eh?